Hi, I'm Danny. Today I'm going to explain a movie where a boy watches his parents get killed by a werewolf, grows up to hunt them, and then meets another boy with a dark, shocking secret. This thrilling tale of werewolves, hunters, and hidden truths will keep you hooked till the end. The adventurous story begins on a full moon night, showing a dense forest where a family is inside a house. The family consists of a boy named Charles who lives with his mom and dad. However, Charles's mom and dad are quite scared. Charles's mother comes to him and puts a locket around his neck that has a werewolf symbol engraved on it. She explains to Charles that his grandfather used to hunt werewolves and was very brave. But before Charles could fully grasp all this, a werewolf enters the house. The werewolf kills both Charles's mom and dad. After that, the werewolf turns towards Charles to attack him as well. But Charles does not give up quickly. He immediately unties a rope and drops the chandelier hanging above onto the werewolf. The werewolf gets seriously injured, and soon after, the entire house catches fire and burns down along with the werewolf. Charles manages to escape in time and saves his life, but after this incident, he becomes an orphan. Now the story fast forwards 25 years. Charles has grown up and matured. He became a werewolf hunter, just like his grandfather, brave and skilled in capturing werewolves. Charles travels from place to place, hunting dangerous werewolves. He also has a team of people who help him and earn money by catching werewolves for others. One day, while Charles is sitting in a bar with his friends, many villagers rush in terrified because a very dangerous werewolf has attacked their village and is killing people. They plead for help, asking Charles and his team to save them from the werewolf. Charles inquires about the situation and learns that the villagers are offering a substantial reward for driving away the werewolf. This piques the interest of Charles and his entire team. The story then introduces a boy named Daniel who lives in the same village with his mother. Daniel worked as an assistant to a doctor to support his household, but he was also deeply fascinated by studying werewolves. He spent much of his time researching werewolf bodies and their structures. Daniel and the doctor would kill anyone who had been bitten by a werewolf, as they knew that if someone bitten by a werewolf were left alive, they would soon transform into a dangerous werewolf themselves, posing a great threat to normal humans. The scene then shifts to the village where the werewolves were causing a lot of trouble. A group from the village captured a werewolf and brought it before the authorities, who were offering money in exchange for the werewolf. This group had killed the werewolf and covered its entire body before presenting it to the authorities and demanding payment for their work. However, Charles and his friends happened to be present at the same place. When Charles saw what was happening, he struck the rope, causing the werewolf's body to fall to the ground. It was then revealed that the body wasn't that of a werewolf, but rather some unknown animal, indicating that the group had tried to deceive the authorities to get the reward. The authorities were furious and refused to pay them. At this point, Charles stepped forward and said, "If you want, I can kill that werewolf for you, but you'll have to pay double the amount you initially promised." The official initially refused to offer more money, but another man convinced the official by explaining that Charles was a trustworthy man who had successfully captured 12 werewolves in the past. Therefore, it would be wise to assign him the task of capturing the werewolf terrorizing their village. After much thought, the official agreed and entrusted the job to Charles, even promising to pay the amount Charles had demanded. This meant that Charles and his entire team would now hunt down and eliminate the dangerous werewolf. When Daniel learned about Charles and his team coming to hunt the werewolf, he wanted to join them and assist in their mission. However, Charles was not yet aware of Daniel's existence, so Daniel was initially rejected when he approached Charles to join his team. Feeling determined, Daniel went straight to the doctor and shared the news that some hunters had arrived in the village to catch the dangerous werewolf. The doctor, however, advised Daniel to focus on his studies. As he had already been accepted into medical college, the doctor suggested that Daniel should become a good doctor and eventually find a cure for the werewolf bites instead of getting involved in the hunt. But Daniel was not convinced and insisted that he had a duty to help rid his village of the werewolf that had taken the lives of so many villagers. He felt it was his responsibility to protect his village with his mind made up. Daniel went back to Charles and once again pleaded to be included in the team. Charles was skeptical, asked Daniel what made him think he was fit to join. Daniel explained that he had gathered extensive knowledge about werewolves and understood them very well. This piqued Charles's interest, so he asked Daniel what exactly he knew. Daniel then sat down with Charles and his team, sharing everything he had learned. He explained that werewolves only transform during the full moon, and anyone bitten by a werewolf would soon turn into one themselves, which is why they would kill any injured person. Daniel also pointed out that the werewolf never attacked the same place twice. It had a specific killing pattern and would not return to a previous location. Impressed by Daniel's knowledge, Charles began to see some value in him, though he still hadn't officially included Daniel as on the team. Daniel then took Charles to the doctor's clinic, where they examined the bodies of those killed by the werewolf based on the injuries and attacks. Daniel estimated that the werewolf they were dealing with was around 7 feet tall. With this information, Charles and his team began constructing traps and snares designed to catch such a large and dangerous werewolf. During this time, Daniel met a wealthy girl named Eva, and the two of them fell in love. Eva was deeply worried about Daniel's safety as he prepared to face the werewolf. Eva was deeply concerned for Daniel's safety and tried to convince him not to join the hunters. She warned him of the dangers, but Daniel was determined, insisting that he was doing it for her safety and for the safety of the villagers. He believed that, once the werewolf was killed, they would no longer have anything to fear. Despite Eva's repeated pleas, Daniel refused to change his mind and ultimately joined Charles's team. In Charles's team, there was a warrior named Stephen who was not at all happy about Daniel joining them. Stephen and Daniel did not get along, and Stephen wanted Daniel to leave. However, with time passing quickly, the night of the full moon had arrived, the night when the werewolf would transform. Meanwhile, at the clinic, the doctor was having a conversation with Daniel's mother, who was worried that the medicine was not working effectively. The doctor gave her a different, strange-looking medicine, assuring her that it would work. Daniel's mother took the medicine and left immediately. The purpose of this mysterious medicine and what Daniel's mother was hiding would soon be revealed. As the full moon night descended, Charles and his team set their traps in the forest, fully prepared to catch the werewolf as soon as it appeared. They were all on high alert. Knowing that any mistake could be fatal, suddenly the werewolf appeared, and the team launched their attack. Charles was extremely cautious, knowing how dangerous the werewolf was. However, from the other side of the forest, another group emerged, intent on capturing the werewolf for a reward. Shockingly, the trap set by Charles's team ended up ensnaring the members of the second group instead of the werewolf. The unexpected interference from this rival group completely disrupted Charles's carefully laid plans. As the other group's members got caught in the traps, the werewolf seized the opportunity to escape. This turn of events led to the deaths of several members of the rival group due to the traps. Charles's team was left disheartened and frustrated, realizing just how cunning and dangerous the werewolf truly was. He deliberately led the other group to that place so that they would get caught in the traps instead of him, leaving Charles and his team empty-handed. Charles and Daniel also realized that this werewolf could think like a human, and in fact it had far greater thinking abilities than humans. This meant that this werewolf could be the most dangerous one ever encountered, and defeating it wasn't going to be easy. Next, the scene shifts to a bar where Daniel's mother worked. The bar was filled with people who were heavily intoxicated from drinking. Daniel's mother gave them a stern look before leaving the bar, but shortly after, the same dangerous werewolf arrived at the bar and started killing everyone who was sitting and drinking, all the people. We were wiped out together because the werewolf was that lethal. Meanwhile, Daniel was having nightmares about the werewolf. It seemed to him that a terrifying werewolf was constantly chasing him, startled awake by these dreams. Daniel immediately went to Charles. By then, it had become clear to everyone that Charles and his team's entire plan had failed, causing people to lose faith in their ability to catch the werewolf. However, Daniel told Charles that they could still catch the werewolf, but they would need to be patient. Daniel. Then he noticed that an old man kept approaching him repeatedly trying to talk to him. Although Daniel was still angry because their plan hadn't succeeded, he told the old man to leave. But when Charles noticed this, he took Daniel to the old man. The old man, who lived in a small settlement, had valuable information about the werewolf. He sat them down and began to explain that the werewolf they were trying to catch was far more powerful than any other werewolf. In fact, this werewolf had been one from the very beginning, as his parents and generations before him had all been werewolves. And just as the full moon waxes and wanes, as the werewolf's powers began to increase significantly, a time was approaching when these powers would become so immense that the werewolf could shift between human and werewolf forms at will. In just a few days, there would be nights with extended durations, caused by the moon being exceptionally close to the earth. These prolonged nights would double the werewolf's strength, allowing it to kill even more people. After learning all this, Daniel and Charles were shocked, but they realized they now had another good opportunity to capture the werewolf. Daniel decided to visit the doctor to check his reports and noticed something very interesting about the werewolf. He immediately went to Charles and told him that so far all the people the werewolf had killed were extremely evil. They had committed crimes and were criminals. This meant that the werewolf was able to distinguish between good and bad people, and it only killed the wicked ones. This was something that didn't quite make sense to them, because werewolves typically don't act this way, but this one was different. The situation worsened when the villagers, along with the authorities, decided that they could no longer rely on Charles and his team because they hadn't produced any results. As a result, the authorities took control of the village and announced that they would imprison anyone they suspected of being able to transform into a werewolf during the full moon. They imprisoned 10 villagers, including Daniel's mother. All the captives were locked up in a jail cell so that if any of them turned into a werewolf during the full moon, the villagers could eliminate them completely. Meanwhile, Charles and his team had also set a trap for the werewolf. They captured a drunken man, planning to use him as bait to lure the werewolf, knowing that the werewolf would come after him because he had committed heinous crimes. The villagers who had imprisoned the suspects, one of the men began to fall seriously ill, and since the night of the full moon had arrived, everyone started to believe that this man was the werewolf in the process of transforming. The villagers were terrified and didn't want to take any risks, so they killed the man. However, Daniel's mother intervened, saying that the man had epilepsy and questioned why they had done such a thing. She pleaded to help the man, and the villagers, uncertain of what to do, released Daniel's mother to assist him, but she took advantage of the situation and immediately fled the scene. As soon as Daniel's mother escaped, the werewolf appearing face to face with Charles and his entire team, the traps that had been set, were successful in injuring the werewolf, and Charles even managed to shoot it in the arm. However, the werewolf didn't retaliate against Charles or his team. It seemed only to have come to harm the man that Charles and his people had tied up. But with no further results, the werewolf quickly retreated from the area, not harming any of the innocent people. Everyone began to suspect that Daniel's mother, who had fled, was actually the werewolf, as the creature appeared right after she left, possibly transformed into it and attacking them. This led the villagers to start searching for Daniel's mother, intending to kill her. Meanwhile, Daniel was shown lying in bed having nightmares about the werewolf again. When he awoke, he found himself unclothed with strange marks on his body. It was then that Daniel realized the marks on his arm were identical to the ones Charles had inflicted on the werewolf's arm. This revealed the shocking truth. In reality, the werewolf was not his mother, but Daniel himself was shocked by this realization. Daniel was deeply disturbed. As he was preparing to leave the house, his mother approached him, telling him that they needed to leave the village as soon as possible because their lives were in grave danger. But now that Daniel had discovered the truth, he knew he couldn't leave the situation as it was. He asked his mother to stay behind and went to Charles. The villagers who believed Daniel's mother was the werewolf were actually mistaken. Charles had figured out that Daniel himself might be the werewolf, because Daniel would always disappear whenever the werewolf appeared. This was a clear indication that Daniel was the one causing the chaos to confirm his suspicions. Charles went to the doctor and started questioning him about Daniel. The doctor had already realized that Charles was close to discovering the truth. Shortly after, Daniel arrived and confessed to Charles that he was the dangerous werewolf responsible for so many deaths. He asked Charles to kill him to put an end to the threat. Charles decided to shoot Daniel, but just as he was about to do so, the doctor intervened, shooting Charles in the arm to prevent him from harming Daniel. The doctor didn't want Daniel to be hurt. Daniel then went to the doctor and asked if he had known about all this beforehand. The doctor revealed that he had indeed taught Daniel everything and had trained him to eliminate people who were detrimental to society, those who engaged in criminal activities. Daniel had used the techniques taught by the doctor to kill those people after transforming into a werewolf. It was revealed that the medicines Daniel's mother used to get from the doctor were not for her, but for Daniel to manage his transformation. Now that everything was out in the open, Daniel was extremely angry with the doctor for letting him continue with this path, despite knowing the truth. The doctor, however, insisted that there was no way to get rid of this curse, and Daniel had to control his werewolf nature and work for the good of others. Despite the doctor's reassurances, Daniel couldn't forgive himself. He ran away to Ava only to find out that Ava's father had also been killed by the villagers because they believed that Daniel was the werewolf who had left Ava alone at home. The villagers were determined to find and eliminate him. Meanwhile, Stephen, a member of Charles's team who despised Daniel, arrived on the scene. Stephen had a personal vendetta and wanted to force himself on Ava. Daniel's girlfriend began to harass Ava, who screamed for help. When Daniel arrived, he found Stephen attacked Ava and immediately engaged in a fierce fight with him. Daniel could not tolerate anyone else touching his girlfriend. The confrontation was intense, and Stephen managed to overpower Daniel, leaving him behind with a threat to return for Ava. After Stephen left, Daniel gave Ava a knife, advising her to use it on Stephen if he came back. He then departed without revealing to Ava that he was the werewolf. As Daniel made his way into the forest, Stephen, who had followed him, attacked and rendered Daniel unconscious. Stephen and his men captured Daniel and hung him up on a wooden structure. Stephen's men soon brought Ava to the site. Stephen showed her that with the full moon, Daniel would transform into a werewolf. Despite Ava's disbelief, Daniel began his transformation as the full moon rose. The sight terrified everyone present, especially Ava, who fled in fear, unable to accept that she had fallen in love with a werewolf. Stephen commanded his men to kill Daniel, and the villagers armed themselves with guns and weapons. Preparing to attack just then, Daniel's mother arrived and tried to explain that Daniel was not at fault. She insisted that he had never committed any wrongdoing and had only punished those who deserved it. She also revealed that Daniel's father had been bitten by a werewolf himself. Daniel was born this way from the beginning. Despite hearing all this, the villagers did not stop Daniel, who had now transformed into a werewolf, escaped from there and ran far away to Eva. Inside the cave, Stephen was trying to assault Eva and was also harming her. At just the right moment, Daniel arrived at the scene in his werewolf form. He immediately attacked Stephen and began injuring him. However, we noticed that Stephen threw the werewolf away. It was then revealed that Stephen was not a normal human, but a vampire, who were the werewolf's bitter enemies. Stephen said that he had been hunting werewolves from the beginning and thought they were extinct until he discovered Daniel. Since then, he had been making every possible effort to hunt him down. A fierce battle ensued between Daniel and the vampire Stephen. Initially, Stephen had the upper hand, but seeing Eva in trouble made Daniel's rage uncontrollable. He attacked Stephen and drove a sharp weapon into his body, killing the vampire on the spot. Now in his werewolf form, Daniel approached Eva. Eva had the same knife that Daniel had given her for protection. However, IA now knew that this werewolf was not just any werewolf, but her Daniel, so she threw the knife away. At that moment, the doctor arrived, telling Daniel to kill Eva because she had learned too much about them, despite the doctor's instructions. Daniel, who had been trained by him and had followed his guidance, refused to harm Eva. Instead, he turned against the doctor, breaking his rules. This angered the doctor, who threatened to kill Eva himself if Daniel didn't do it. Just then, a gunshot was heard from behind the doctor, hitting him and killing him on the spot. Turned out that Charles was behind him and had fired the gun. Charles said that the score was settled because the doctor had previously injured him. And now Charles approaches Daniel after everything settles down. Daniel transforms back into his normal form. Eva comes directly in front of Daniel and pleads with Charles, saying, "Please don't kill him. I can completely heal and control him." Charles realizes that Daniel is not one of the bad people. He only attacked those who could be harmful to society. Therefore, Charles removes the locket, which was a werewolf's given to him by his mother, and puts it on Daniel. Charles then explains to Daniel that he should hunt werewolves in this manner and eliminate bad people to protect the human race. Daniel agrees to this. Afterward, Charles decides to leave his work and live a normal life. Charles leaves, and Daniel and Eva come close to each other. Daniel jokingly asks Eva if she still likes him. Eva hugs Daniel, indicating that they are still in a relationship, and so our wonderful story ends in this manner.